Good morning, everybody. How are you? I read a couple of articles. One right just before I came on the air here. It talks about how Trump and actually, it was using JFK as an example, Bobby Kennedy, Jr. rather, as an example where he was asking his employees to snitch on other employees. You realize, of course, that that's Gestapo technique, as well as Gestapo, as well as KGB techniques that are being used now by American intelligence agencies and the rest of the people. But we're all pretty much convinced that Robert F. Kennedy is a complete moron and hasn't got a clue as to what he's doing. Well, that's okay, so long as we know it. He's going to end up in an asylum before he's fired, maybe. Not sure about that. I would have loved to have seen him run for president. That had to be one of the world's biggest jokes. But, what are you going to do? So anyhow, along with that, I was watching a headline story on CNN where Hegseth didn't know that, didn't notify the administration when he stopped the shipment of weapons to the Ukraine a week ago or so, anyhow, He just did it on his own, basically. And that brought to the forefront this story for today. The incompetency that's existing inside the Trump administration is absolutely amazing. Some of the women go along to, I think, as eye candy when he brings them into certain situations because they don't really have much to say. But the thing is that the level of incompetency, and they don't work together. They're just a bunch of individuals out there that have titles, and they go around and do some strange stuff, folks. I mean, how does a Secretary of Defense go out and make decisions that are administrative? The Secretary of State should have something to say about it. Other people should be involved in that decision, and he makes it on his own. How does that happen? His level of incompetency is rivaling RFK's, and this is the strange part about this administration. I didn't think the last Bush was a real intelligent guy, and but he made some good decisions. He was smart enough to put some very smart people around himself, and even Trump did some of that in the beginning. But then he fired the guys that were real smart, They were smarter than him. The problem with those guys is they wouldn't put up with his bullshit, and then he got fired in his first administration. Now he's got people who will put up with his bullshit. Hegseth sits next to Trump on his left side or right side, depending on where the whatever's going on is going on, and it just he'll actually be closer to Trump than Vance is, which is, I think, done on purpose, because Vance is never supposed to stand next to the President of the United States. The Vice President should never publicly stand next to the President of the United States unless it's inside and they got armed guards around, because that's how you take out two. You know what I mean? But the Secretary of Defense is sitting there, and he's making all these mistakes. He's gotten caught with the leaking sensitive information, not on purpose, just setting up insecure phone lines and things like this in his office. discussing classified information on insecure lines. Or when they say insecure, that's basically a public phone number. You know, he's not only. I mean, he's showing his stupidity. I mean, he was. Most people felt he wasn't qualified for the job in the first place. You know, just because he was an officer in the National Guard. Trust me, I met a lot of those officers when I was in the National Guard, and it's one of the reasons I didn't enlist, because the time when my reenlistment came up, they were starting to send these units into regular army, and I didn't want to be around the command structure. It was ridiculous. These guys, surprised some of them weren't wearing diapers. I had I think I've said this story on here, maybe not recently anyhow. But when I was in the National Guard, I had a company commander. He was at the highest level, not the highest, was that the highest level? I think he was the highest level. He was a captain. Before that, we had lieutenants, first and second lieutenants. Guard is different than the rest of the world. But anyhow, this guy was a captain. And one day I'm watching, we were given the opportunity if we wanted to see these films about the Vietnam medics working and whatnot. And my buddy and I, we took it up because we didn't feel like working that day. So we were in there sitting down, relaxed, feet up on the chairs in front of us. It's a black and white film now, okay? They bring this black guy in, and he's shot up. He's got a leg wound. They cut the leg, and blood shoots straight up in the air. You can't tell it's black liquid. So anyhow, next thing you know, we hear a crash behind us. We turn around. There's our company commander on the floor. He faints at the sight of blood. Now we're not a combat outfit, so I'm not good. But we are a. If we get federalized, we're a vehicular support unit. We will go out and retrieve tanks, things like that, trucks and whatnot, bring them back and try to repair them. So technically speaking, we are supposed to be a combat-ready outfit. Trust me. My unit wasn't even toilet trained, I think, So I didn't have any formal training, and yet I repaired solved a couple of massive problems. In other words, they weren't real big problems, but they took weeks for people to figure out what they were, and then I just walked by and figured it out. Right time, right place, because I listen to engines and stuff like that. That's how I fixed cars. But I digress. The National Guard is not or wasn't. Maybe it's better now. I don't know. I have no idea. I haven't met any National Guardsmen lately, so I don't know. Most of them are not from New Jersey or areas like that. So I never met any before I left. But they're definitely not high on the priority of military experience. The officers aren't graduates of West Point or anything like that. They might have gone to military high school or something like that, but they're not well-trained or well-versed in the military. And his job was mostly logistics, and he's still screwing it up. He screws up logistic problems. That denying the weapons to the Ukraine, which were defensive weapons that were supposed to, which are now going out, is not his job. He can do it when somebody tells him to do it, but he can't think of the idea himself and then do it. None of those guys are supposed to do that. And that, that brought up another issue. What's Donnie doing? He apparently didn't know anything about this, and he's shocked. I don't know why. We have this level of incompetency that's, we're going to do this today. No. Next day, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this. there's a lack of communication apparently amongst his people. There's a lack of experience. There's a lack of familiarity with the positions that they hold. The smart ones are the ones that keep their mouths shut and don't do anything. Like Patel, he really doesn't do anything. He's big on going to sporting events and stuff like that rather than working. So he lets the agency sort of run itself with qualified people in their position, and they still screw up. Look, the most qualified person on the face of the earth can make a mistake. That's just the way life is. That's the human condition, if you would. But if you take a stupid person, that's insulting the education system. If you take a person who's not familiar with the type of job that he's supposed to be doing, then you have a problem. It causes serious friction amongst the others. It caused mistakes to be made. You brought in Musk and his people to set up an efficiency program. Was there a problem with efficiency in the U.S.? Yes. But to solve it wasn't to fire everybody and to close down the operation. Fix it. Fix what the FEMA, fix health services, fix this stuff. Don't get rid of it. These programs are necessary for the survival of people. And although Donald doesn't care about the survival of people, I don't think he's people. I think he's just taking up space, really. Shooting his mouth off because he can. He loves that. I don't know how much. You read all these articles, and then I go looking for examples of the fact that he's losing his mind and whatnot, and I really can't find examples of him like I did with Biden. Where Biden would just freeze up or stutter or could barely walk. Biden's a little older. I can barely walk. I have trouble walking, but I walk every day because that's why I have a dog. So I get out of the house every day and I walk. I love animals, And Lucy's got the biggest fan club in this part of Colombia, I think. Makes me feel a little weird out there sometimes, but Trump plays golf every chance he gets. He cheats, so it's not a legitimate game to him. It's just something that he can cheat at. People knew he was a liar. He was caught lying. He's a criminal. He's been indicted and convicted, and they bring him in to run for president. Why? What great ideas does he have? He didn't have any great ideas. He ran his companies like they were mob-owned, sucked them dry, bankrupted them. What happens is he goes into these businesses and whatnot. He's doing the same thing in the government, and his personal income is never touched. I don't think it's been touched in 20, 30 years. Probably never. As far as I can tell, in his adult life, has he ever touched any of his so-called personal income? He goes in, gets a job, and buys everything on the company. All right, toilet paper for whatever he's buying and getting out of the company. He's sucking the company dry. The company's got no money left. That's what happens with these casinos. I mean, these casinos were poorly run, yes, but they were poorly run to the extent that everybody was doing the same thing, paying for everything. Lavish dinners, drinks, jet flights, everything, That's why nobody wants to look at his taxes to see what because he doesn't want you to see what he's been deducting. his life. He's just Trump's not a criminal. He's a well, yeah, I guess he is. I mean, but you know, I don't think he's thinks that way. I think he's just thinks he's entitled to everything he does. You know. All right. Don't know whether this story will interested you at all or what's going on. You know. But I'm going to look up some more to find out what's going on with the government of the United States, which seems to be the laughing stock of the everywhere. You know, you saw that and along the lines of all this bullshit. Putin is. They're telling everybody that Putin played Trump. Of course he did. Trump hasn't got any power over Putin or Yi or Little Kim in North Korea. He doesn't have any power over those people. He doesn't have any power over the Ayatollah. You know, unless it's a military, what we do with our military. And the fact that they didn't do what they thought they did do, and they went around and bragging and said we totally obliterated their nuclear capabilities, and it's proven that they didn't. You know, they sent them only back a couple of months. These people are very dangerous now. You know, this is what I don't never understand. Trump manipulates people, but he doesn't. He doesn't know how to talk to them and con them. You know, he's not believable. But either is Putin, but Putin don't give a shit. He just does what he wants to do. He knows they can't do anything. That's the mutual destruction situation that they're in. You know, they know that the other country's not going to do it. They could talk all the shit they want. You know, that's why something that's like what's going on in the Ukraine is extremely important. That's why Putin's borrowing 10,000 soldiers or more from Korea or whatever. You know. Listen, I'm done for the day. Please subscribe to the videos. You know, I don't make money off of that. The amount of subscribers I'd have to make, I don't have enough time to do that. You know, I don't publicize myself enough. So if you're lucky enough to catch one of these videos, just hit the subscribe button. You'd just be helping out an old guy and his dog, that's all. Making us look like we're smarter than we are. All right? Okay, you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow.